Today, we discuss 2024 hot takes. We talk about the process behind making our hot takes that we actually want to act upon in moderation, of course. And we discussed real trades in real leagues involving our hot take players. Stick around for all of that and more.
Hello and welcome into the Dino Construction.
Excuse me. I am back hosting today, JP. It is good to be back. Hello and welcome back into the Dino Construction podcast. I'm your host, Justin. Excited to have my very first episode I'm recording in the United States. So happy to be for the first time on the same time zone as these two guys. We're giving David the week off. We're all taking one off this summer. So just joined by JP here today. We're going to hop right into our community question where we get your hot takes. What exactly was our community question last week, JP?
Well, we had a fun one this week. Our community question was, what is your favorite hot take for the 2024 season?
Yeah, I kind of buried the lead on that one. David would have called me out for that. The very first hot take we had was from Adam Romensko 7113. His hot take, not hot tank, hot take is that Tank Dell outscores Puka Nacua this year. That is a spicy take, I do have to admit. I don't see that coming to be. I think if there was no Stephon Diggs there, I would probably say I could see a much better path. There's a lot of target competition there. And outside of a now healthier Cooper Kupp, there's not that much target competition for Nacua. So spicy, definitely a hot take. If that happens, man, I will buy you a drink. I'll move wherever you are. I'll meet you there. That is definitely up there. I appreciate the boldness. And JP, what is our next response?
And this one is from Tex-Mex MSL. And he says, my hot take is Pat Freiermuth will finish as a top 5 tight end this year. Gotta love the spicy takes. I mean, there is an opportunity for him to be the second target earner on that team. It's going to be tough for me to see it, but I respect the hot, spicy takes. And Justin, what is next week's question?
Yeah, so we are ecstatic. We are moving into like actual news, even if it is somewhat hype news. Training camp starting. So, of course, we want to take advantage of that and actually talk about real stuff going on football fields, even if they're not real games. And so our question is, how do you try to take advantage of the training camp hype season? And JP, where can the fine folks respond?
And we would love if you guys were to comment right here on YouTube, or you can message us on X or email at dinoconstructionff@gmail.com. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. We do our best to respond to anyone, so please subscribe, drop a like, and give us a follow on X at DinoconFF.
Thank you, JP. And now we're going to move right into our hot takes here. Kind of like we did last week, you guys did last week in our breakouts episode. We want to kind of define like our process for making these hot takes. So although hot takes are supposed to be fun, of course, we do start with evaluating situation, looking for players that have the skills. Perhaps it's like reception perception data or other data that we're looking at from yards per route run, metrics that we see that are underlying where they just didn't perform on the macro, but we see these micro things. It could be a logical path because of a player ahead of them getting removed from it, an increase in opportunity, or a new quarterback that we think is going to be a star, for example. Genuinely, they don't start as a hot take, right? They start with this idea that this player has an opportunity to exceed expectations. And then we kind of pick, right, that top or potentially bottom 1 to 5% outcome. And for that reason, we're going to be doing a scorching hot take, which kind of we would probably say is somewhere around like a 1 to 5% chance of happening. And then we're going to do kind of a more like lukewarm take that we say maybe like 10% chance of happening, maybe a little bit higher with some of these, but still a little bit of a hot take because we want to give a little bit more actionable of a hot take along with the scorching hot take. So we'll do those two types of takes for each player or perhaps series of players on a team we're doing a take on. Anything that you kind of take into consideration different there, JP?
Now I'm looking at the same things. Some of these hot takes, yeah, they might be kind of, hard to see, but I mean, there's things that happen every single year that you do not see coming. So we're just looking at what we think could be possible, but would not be, what we are projecting. But this is going to be a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. And with my first fun hot take, I have Jayden Daniels as QB1 overall, not a QB1. My kind of lukewarm on this would be top 8. And honestly, I think the floor for this guy is top 12. So like QB1 overall, I see a path for this, and it's pretty simple. It's rushing upside. Last year's top 3 were Allen, Hurts, and Lamar. We know that rushing QBs have that hack. You always say cheat code, so does everyone else. A bad NFL QB in Justin Fields was the QB6 in points per game in 2022. The weapons, in my opinion, they're acceptable. Terry McLaurin is a 1 in the NFL. I believe that. Jahan Dotson is a fine piece. I know, for example, reception perception, they really like this guy. I know you really respect reception perception as well as David. You guys have gotten me way in on their stuff since then. So if they tell me that he's a good NFL wide receiver, I believe that even if he doesn't end up hitting for fantasy, he's going to make his quarterback better. And if you've been listening to us from the beginning here, first of all, thank you. But you know that I love me some Luke McCaffery as a slot wide receiver. And then a combination of Ertz and Sinnott at tight end. Eckler as a third down safety blanket combined with Brian Robinson on the early downs. I think this offense is going to surprise. I also think it's a bad team from last year, so the offense will need to pass or have the QB scramble. Like I mentioned earlier, the floor on this guy to me is low-end QB1, QB 12-ish range. I don't know that I love him as an NFL QB. Like, he's got to prove he can do it in the NFL, but as long as he stays healthy, I don't think there's any question that he's going to be doing it for fantasy. And QB1, you heard it here first.
Yeah, I mean, it is a spicy take. We had not seen him play in the NFL. He was the number 2 pick in the draft, but I mean, he has the rushing upside. I do think that it is at least a high-end outcome that isn't impossible for him because of that rushing upside. We see the guys that get at least 5 fantasy points per game on the ground. These guys at an 89% rate, they are getting to be, right in that top 12 range of quarterbacks. So yeah, he's got a safe floor, and it also gives him a high ceiling as well. I think Terry McLaurin is a great number 1 wide receiver. I think he's underrated, and just the pieces on this offense in general are pretty underrated. And Jayden Daniels, he played a lot of college football. So I think that it is reasonable for him to come out of the gates being, looking like he belongs in the NFL, being ready for the NFL. So it is a spicy take, but not impossible.
Guaranteed. What is your first hot take?
So my first hot take is that Kyle Pitts is the tight end 1. Yeah, not a tight end 1. Like you said, the tight end 1. To finish as a high-end tight end, I mean, you can do so with either being, really high volume guy or a high touchdown guy. And we saw this last year between Evan Engram and Sam Laporta. They were the tight end 1 and 2. Evan Engram, he did it on large volume. He had 114 receptions, but he only had 4 touchdowns, right? Sam Laporta, he had 10 touchdowns on his way to being the tight end 1 on the season. He did it on 86 receptions. Both of these guys were actually below 1,000 receiving yards. Neither one of them cracked 1,000 receiving yards last year. And guess what Kyle Pitts did in his rookie year? He surpassed 1,000 receiving yards as a rookie. He did it in an efficient manner as well. Laporta and Engram, they had 10.3 yards per reception for Laporta, 8.5 for Evan Engram. Kyle Pitts had 15.1 yards per reception as a rookie. And we know that this guy is an athletic freak show and one of the best tight end prospects that we ever saw. I mean, his yards per route run in college was insane. He was a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. And now these last 2 years, yeah, they were pretty disappointing. But I just want to highlight just how good he was as a rookie. He was the tight end 6, and he played the first month of his NFL career at 20 years old. He turned 21 years old in the middle of his rookie year. So that is very impressive. And he did it when the Falcons were 19th in the league in pass attempts that year. And now, like I said, these last 2 years, they have stunk, right? Mm-hmm. They had Marcus Mariota in 2022, arguably the worst starting quarterback in the league. And they passed the ball, their pass attempts in the league that year. They were 31st in pass attempts, which was like, they fell 415. That would have been far and away the lowest last year. So yeah, I understand why he would have disappointed that year. And in 2023, he was coming off of a knee injury, his MCL. I think that really hampered him to start the year. And they also had Desmond Ridder throwing the ball, another really bad quarterback. He had the highest turnover-worthy play in the NFL last year. This guy was not good. And they barely threw any touchdowns at all. And they had the 25th most pass attempts in the league. So I think these last 2 years, I know they sucked and we were all excited, like Kyle Pitts, he's going to step up. This is the year. But I think this is the year that he could do it. Kirk Cousins comes in, and this has been a guy who we've seen put up the top 5 passing production. We saw last year, TJ Hawkinson, he was the tight end 1 of the year before he went down with injury. Kyle Pitts, he was amazing as a rookie. And if he's any better than he was at that point, where we saw he could get 1,000 receiving yards, I think it's going to be all about the touchdowns for him. If he can get close to double-digit touchdowns, I do think that it is at least in his range of outcomes to be the tight end 1.
And then give me a little bit lower, like a more of a lukewarm take. What would that be, that bar for tight end insert number here that still you think is a hot take, but maybe not flaming hot?
I'd probably say like top 4. He's being drafted just outside of the top 5. I believe he's at tight end 6 in redraft. So I think that I think he's going to out exceed expectations. And I think he's really, really talented. And if he's fully healthy with Kirk Cousins, I'm really excited to see what his offense is going to look like with Zach Robinson now also the Rams OC who was under Sean McVay coming over.
All right. So top 1 is your flaming hot. Top 4 as your more lukewarm, still pretty hot take. My next hot take is Luke McCaffery. Mentioned him just a moment ago talking about Jayden Daniels. You'll notice me blushing right here just thinking about my rookie crush. I love dreaming about this man.
And the family's pretty handsome.
There is a bit of this one that is vibes and player takes. I'll be honest, I usually try to avoid those because I'm not a talent evaluator or anything like that. I'm just a fantasy football fan. I do think that there is something to this guy. So I listened to Reception Perception. JP referred me to a specific episode about the offense, and they have him as a little bit more of a project wide receiver, which makes sense given the fact that he's only been playing wide receiver for 2 years. However, we've seen a huge improvement on this guy. So playing at Rice after he transferred from Nebraska, where he started out as a quarterback, he's only been a wide receiver for 2 years. Playing at Rice, 25% dominator rating his first year, 37.5% the second year. Now, granted, this isn't like a year 2 breakout age or anything as a wide receiver. I kind of talked about this point in our rookie crush episode many months ago. He was a 4th year player, right? So you have to take it with a grain of salt. However, it's a lot of improvement we've seen very fast. He works hard and he has a pretty quick ability to learn that he's shown so far. He's also got athletic ability, 6'2", 198, has good size, 4.46 speed, good agility, a 6'7" 3-cone drill, and decent, although I'll admit not great draft capital from the current regime though. And that kind of matters to me, right? This is the current regime's guy. That being said, like obviously Dotson first round capital a couple of years ago, Terry McLaurin, also like a guy that obviously they're pretty invested in him. They love him. So not like I'm expecting him being a 3rd round pick to guarantee he just rises up the depth chart. However, I love this guy. And even though there's a chance he's only going to see the field when there's no 2 wide receiver sets, only like for 3 wide receiver set. Yeah, even though there's a chance only on 11 personnel, he's going to be out there. I'm still interested in what he can do playing as a kind of big slot wide receiver until he just develops more and more and more of that pre. Also, like he's a guy that he can run an end around, right? He can take a direct snap and play wild card. They could get as creative as they want to. And if there's a offensive coordinator that I don't trust to run my team, but I trust to maybe do fun things, it's Cliff Kingsbury. Maybe he'll do something fun with this guy. I wouldn't want him in charge of my team, but maybe he'll do something. There's a lot of vibes involved here. I'll admit that. But my lukewarm take, that's I think still pretty hot, is maybe he's not a top 36 wide receiver, but for the second half of the season, so the back 8 games, he is top 36. I love this guy. I know it's player takey, but I've been in love with this guy for a while. Let me just crush on this man, please.
I definitely do think that this is a hot take for sure. But I do think that he could be a good fit with Cliff Kingsbury horizontal raid type of offense. That's a lot of what he's ran in the NFL, even in college. And I think this actually fits with what Luke McCaffrey does well. If there's something that I think he does really well, it's running across the middle with the slants and the flat routes, just running from sideline to sideline. That's one of the things that he has been good at. A point that I want to make that kind of worries me about McLaurin a little bit is that their offensive line is pretty terrible. Their number 1 best offensive lineman is Tyler Biadasz, and he was the 3rd or 4th best lineman on the Cowboys. Yeah, I think that there is a chance that the downfield routes don't really develop as often as they want to for Terry McLaurin, and where Jayden Daniels, he's either going to have to take it off or check it down, to one of these lower, quicker developing routes that Luke McCaffrey is probably going to be running a lot more often. And like you said, he hasn't spent a lot of time playing the position. Now, you could have 2 different takes with this. You could say, okay, well, maybe it takes, a while for him to get up to speed, as he develops. Or you can see that, okay, he's got untapped potential and that this guy could be really, really good, right? That's the side that you're veering here, obviously, because he's your hot take guy and a guy that you love.
Am I paraphrasing you incorrectly? Because it sounds to me like with your Terry thing that you're saying he's actually the wide receiver 1 on the team, right?
Definitely. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. 100%. Here we go. We're going even hotter takes. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, Jacoby Myers, he's a guy who played quarterback in college and he transitioned to wide receiver. And I do think that there is at least something to the fact that these guys that played quarterback, they know what to look for. They're like, all right, now that I'm playing wide receiver, this is what I liked what my wide receivers did when they were running routes. This is how I can become available for my quarterback. So I can see a path to where he can succeed and he has this untapped potential. I'm personally a guy who's a little bit more skeptical, but I want to at least paint a picture there to, see that there is at least a higher end outcome for this guy.
Thanks for hyping up my guy. Please let me know who your next guy is so I cannot return the favor.
It's a pretty similar hot take to yours, and that's Jermaine Burton to finish as a wide receiver 3, so a top 36 wide receiver. And this is another rookie that we're, saying could finish in this range. And I think, a more lukewarm one, because I'm bullish on this guy. I'd say as a wide receiver 4, top 48. Just looking at last year, we've seen that there have been teams that can support 3 guys that are putting up top 36 wide receiver types of numbers. Looking over at the Vikings, right? Justin Jefferson, he was wide receiver 6 in points per game. Hawkinson, if you translate his points per game from 14.6 to a wide receiver, he would have been wide receiver 20, and Addison was in wide receiver 31. So these guys, they all had top 36 wide receiver production over there. And also, in 2 full years with Joe Burrow, Tyler freaking Boyd finished as a wide receiver 3 in 2021 and 2022. So I do think that it is possible for this guy, Jermaine Burton, who like I said, I'm bullish on, and reception perception is actually bullish on this guy as well. Against man and press last year at Alabama and the SEC, he had an 86th percentile success rate versus man and press, and he was solid against zone. And shockingly, when Matt Harmon did his stacked wide receiver rankings for the last 4 draft classes, he had Jermaine Burton as a top 15 wide receiver from the last 4 draft classes. Yeah, so he's really bullish on this guy. And this guy, he wins down the field, right? I think that they're going to use Jamar Chase more in the slot, and that's kind of what I need for this hot take to come to fruition, because I think Jermaine Burton, he is a guy that is going to succeed on the outside. He wins down the field. So I think that having these big splash touchdown plays down the field is going to really help to boost these production numbers. But if he does finish as a top 36 wide receiver, his dynasty value will rise drastically. What do you think about this? Because I know that I'm higher on Jermaine Burton than you are.
I definitely think there's a lot more credence to making a hot take about a rookie who has a star NFL, no doubt about it, franchise quarterback throwing to him. Of course, the depth chart is incredibly more climbable in Washington than it is in Cincinnati. However, if I had to rate these two or bet on which one's more likely, I would say yours is much more probable. There's a quarterback we know can support 3 weapons, right? There is a definite opportunity for this guy, a talented player who, honestly, a large part of it was character issues is why he even dropped in the draft, right? So I really honestly, I feel like a hot take is wide receiver 24 or better. Can I get you to commit to that, JP? Any chance I could pick on you? Or even top 30? Come on, we can say top 30. Right? I mean,
I get a top 30. I thought that's where you're going to go. Yeah. Honestly, I could see it. Like I said, Tyler Boyd, 2021, wide receiver 31, and Jermaine Burton, he gets more high-value targets.
All right, you heard it here first. Wide receiver 1 overall. No, but I got him to push up to admitting wide receiver 30 is maybe a possibility. I could definitely see a path to that. I think it's more likely than my Luke McCaffery take, just not as fun.
Yeah, I know. I got to respect that you went pretty spicy with yours.
And now that we're done getting along, let's go ahead and clash a little bit on the next one. My next hot take: no Packers wide receiver finishes in the top 24, and no Packers tight end finishes in the top 12. So no tight end 1 and no wide receiver 2 or better on the Packers. And here to make it even a little bit spicier, all of this occurring while Jordan Love is still a top 6 fantasy scoring quarterback again. Now, this is not really an indictment on any player on the team. It's more of a belief that there are too many cooks in the kitchen, which I've been saying all offseason across different platforms, whether it's talking about my tight end sells on the team, etc., being this whole tight end room, because I'm not smart enough to figure out who's going to make it. And the honest probable answer is neither of them will be a real difference maker. And it's kind of that same belief for all of these positions. I know one of our listeners, that fantasy football chick, commented on our players that are overrated, overvalued episode last week and said that they would have mentioned Jordan Reed on that one because it's just going to be so difficult to do things on this room. Same reason they gave for Roma Dunze, right? Because anytime you have 3 or 4 solid options at the wide receiver room, then 2 solid tight ends and 2 solid running backs, I think that the real winner is Jordan Love and the losers are everybody else. So I thought that was a really good point they made just about that. And I personally agree with that. I'm selling most of these players. I did just draft Christian Watson in the 9th round of a startup draft because Christian Watson in the 9th round is a very low price to pay for the possible upside, in my opinion. And it was a start 11, so I can afford to flex him with the boom bust possibilities if he's healthy. I think he's a guy that could win me weeks, but probably will finish wide receiver 30 on this season, which is fine as my 5th or sixth wide receiver. Jordan Reed, I love his talent. It's a very crowded room. I'm aware that he was wide receiver 10 from, I don't remember what week it was on, but wide receiver 10 from a certain point on to the rest of the season. It kind of coincided with Jordan Love's really good end of the year. However, Christian Watson was out. And then Dontayvion Wicks, this guy that everyone is hyped up about because of his great metrics, his amazing route running. I know reception perception on this guy is great. All of this to be said, those three names that I just got that people are saying could all be the wide receiver one on this team potentially, none of them were actually the wide receiver one on the team in the playoffs last year. That was Romeo Doubs. So I just think the real winner, like I said at the beginning, is Jordan Love. It's an incredibly crowded room. My hot take here isn't so much about the talent of any of these players. It's just the situation. I could definitely see, and I think it's probable one of these guys does get into the top 24. I'm being pretty hyperbolic by this just to kind of establish that point of the fact that it's a situation that I think has a very capped ceiling because of this. Unless one guy truly separates himself as a difference maker, which I think is different to do because I think they're all talented players. So I guess my lukewarm take to wrap it up is very similar to the first one, except now I'm going to back it up a little bit. There's no top 18 wide receiver on the Packers and no tight end finishes in the top 8 would be my slightly less hot take that honestly I think is pretty mild because I think that's not that wild for that to happen. JP, am I an idiot? And if so, is it because of this take?
No, I don't think it's a stupid take because, I mean, like you said, I think all four of them are pretty talented in their own right. I'm low on Dobbs, but I mean, he played solid for the team last year. And I think that because if they have all four of these guys available, they're going to kind of cannibalize each other. Some guys are going to have a big week one week and then do nothing another week because of the way that they're going to be spreading the targets around in this room. And I think all four of these guys are going to have to be relatively healthy for them to all, miss the top 24, which, I don't want to predict injury. So, I mean, if Christian Watson plays a full season and all these other guys do too, yeah, I think that your take is going to be even more likely. But if one of these guys misses, like Christian Watson did, 8, 9, 10 weeks, then I think it is much more likely that one hops into the top 24 if they establish themselves as the top guy. And I just double checked here. Jayden Reed was weeks 10 through 18 when he was wide receiver 10 in that stretch. But yeah, I mean, I see a realistic outcome where this does happen. And I think that your take can come true as well as my next hot take, which you would say that they're pretty opposite hot takes. They're kind of clashing head to head, but I think both could be true. And my hot take is that Dontayvion Wicks leads Green Bay wide receivers in receiving yards. Now, this guy, he's projected to be the wide receiver 4 in production. He's being drafted that way in Underdog. He's being drafted that way in Dynasty as well. I'd say my lukewarm take would be that he's the second leading wide receiver, right? Let me tell you why I think that this is a possible outcome. And that's because Dontayvion Wicks, he played 15 games last year, so he missed a couple of games. He played only 46% of snaps on the year. And also, he had the second most lost yards to defensive pass interferences, which I thought that was pretty interesting. If he would have had those yards, then he would have had nearly 700 receiving yards on the year, passing Romeo Doubs and being only about 100 yards behind Jayden Reed for the lead, shockingly enough, because he had almost 600 receiving yards last year, which I thought was actually kind of surprising given the fact that he did not play a ton and that he was a rookie from day 3. But reception perception, they like him as well. His success rate versus man and press were right around 70th percentile. And he was right at about average against zone. And this is a quote that he had, that Matt Harmon had in his profile. And it's that Matt LaFleur had to restrain himself at a press conference from ripping the young wide receivers because they were all clearly very good, but they weren't always on their landmarks in terms of timing and route depth. Wicks was an offender at times this season, but by the end of the year with more time on task, he was one of the cleanest and crispest members of the wide receiver room. So I think that we saw development from Dontayvion Wicks as a player. And going into year 2, if he's even better, he might be forced to be on the field more often. And he's actually very, very versatile. He played all 3 wide receiver spots, and he even lined up in the backfield at times. He played X, flanker, slot, and he was also shockingly, surprisingly good as a tackle breaker. So I've been more and more impressed of this guy. But he was in space on nearly 7% of his sampled routes. He went down on first contact on 41% of those plays, and he broke multiple tackles on 25% of them. That's a really, really high number. So I think that this guy, he's got a lot of the tools, and he was a first-year player who really popped as a rookie last year. So I think that he might be one of the most talented receivers on this team, and if they put him on the field more, I think this could happen.
Yeah, it's to me, it's just the fact that honestly, you make a really good point and a really good case for him. Last week in our breakout episode, I feel like David made a really good case for Christian Watson, and I've heard really good cases for Jayden Reed, and then Romeo Doubs is a thorn in everybody's side. I just am not bold enough in this hot take episode to pick anyone. Instead, I'm bold enough to say all of these guys. Nah, man. And I could definitely be wrong on this. This is an offense that eventually there will be a guy that separates and is the stud alpha from this team. It is possible you could make your call and pick one of them this year. I do think there's also a pretty good chance that one of two things: the stud alpha is either not on this team, or at the very least, it takes them until the second half of next season to start really separating. So we're not going to see it on a large scale throughout the season. So I think because there's the ability to a lot of the time get a first for Jayden Reed and then also sell some of these other guys at some price points that I'm happy to sell them for, that I'm kind of just out on it. I'm excited in our trade segment later on to see a little bit of a price point that you have on Wicks.
I think that this is a great conversation to have about the wide receiver room and just the team in general. And I just think that the reason I like Dontayvion Wicks and investing in him is he's just the cheapest guy. You know, if he was priced above Christian Watson, yeah, I probably wouldn't be very invested in him at all. But since he is the fourth, most expensive player from this team, and like I just mentioned, I think he's a talented guy. Yeah, I'm willing to invest. If you're telling me he's priced below Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson, I'll have some shares of him.
Yeah, I'm here just checking out. Did he actually go after Romeo Doubs somehow in our startup draft that we just did? And somehow he did. I do think for the most part, he is going after Doubs, and you're not going to be able to get anyone to trade Doubs for Wicks. I think that's a pretty rare thing to see personally. Just, I know like within the hype trains on Twitter, I mean, there's like the memes people make about Dontayvion Wicks, Dynasty wide receiver 1 type of stuff. The hype train it's real. There's definitely a lot of people that are aware of him, the statistics behind him, etc. But yeah, you're right. The highest price point you'll see him is wide receiver 3 on the team. And sometimes you'll see him as wide receiver 4 on the team priced out too. So it is a cheap bet. I think it's probably the cheapest place you can make the bet is in a startup though, because I think in an actual league, I think people are kind of a little bit of a baking in the upside to his price a little bit more than you would in a startup, for example.
And he's kind of on that verge of like worth a second round rookie pick and between a third. So I think it is kind of an awkward spot too, because I wouldn't want to necessarily pay a second and a third wouldn't get it done. So
someone didn't look at the show sheet when I was going to ask them that later. I'm just teasing. So let's put this one up. We're going to go out of order here, JV, on our trades. Start 11, Dontayvion Wicks or a 25-second. And for those of you just joining us for the first time, we do this trade segment here. And every trade segment is pulled from real leagues on dynasty-daddy.com. So, JP, start 11, Dontayvion Wicks or a 25-second random. I pulled this one up to try to get your opinion on it. I already got an answer from David a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I would take the second at this point. I could see that if I needed some wide receiver help and it was my second on a competing roster that I think, I'm going to make it be the 211, 212, maybe I'd consider it. But a random 25-second, yeah, I'm going to take that over Dontayvion Wicks, even though I really like him. All right, Justin, this one is for you. It is a start 11. It is Justin Herbert or Xavier Worthy and Jayden Daniels, 2 of your guys.
Honestly, kind of 3 of my guys here, because Justin Herbert is a guy that I think is worthy of taking in the first round of a startup. Xavier Worthy, one of my rookie crushes, my 109, and Jayden Daniels, my hot take here. Even though he is my hot take, I did acknowledge I think he's going to be a QB1. I don't know that he's going to be a QB in 4 years. I have no doubt that Justin Herbert, absolute stud, arm talent, is going to be a QB1 for the next 7 years, barring injury at the very least. I think he's going to be a QB1 with the talent that they have on the team. And then I think as the talent evolves and they draft new players next year, I think he's going to continue to be a QB1, a QB1, a QB1. And there is a world where in 2 years or even a year, I'd rather have Jayden Daniels than Justin Herbert. So it's a free Xavier Worthy. I have to acknowledge that's a possibility. However, from a risk standpoint, I will take Justin Herbert here. I feel like it's by a smidge, but I think I would do it every time. But it's close. I understand both sides. I know like a lot of guys, like I listen to Dynasty Nerds all the time. Those guys all have him as like a top 5 or 6 startup pick. So I think there's a lot of people who are just low on him because of situation. It reminds me a little bit of Lamar Jackson last year. Like people were low on him because of situation. He dropped, etc. But he's just an elite NFL player.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident him being around in the NFL for 8+ years. I think he's a great quarterback as well. So I can't blame you for the safety there.
And I'm actually going to give you a little bit more Dontayvion Wicks here. Start 11, Jermaine Burton or Dontayvion Wicks, JP?
This one hurts me.
I wanted to cause you pain.
Oh, man. I think that I will go with Jermaine Burton, and I think that's because I'm pretty confident that T. Higgins is going to leave. That's what I think. And honestly, I think Jermaine Burton, he might be better this year. Even though Jamar Chase, he is a stud. I just think that Jermaine Burton, that his value will rise once T. Higgins goes. And like I said, I believe in Jermaine Burton to a pretty high degree.
That's fair. I'm glad I don't have to make a choice on that one. However,
start 11, Luke McCaffery or Jermaine Burton, Justin.
Oh, shoot. Listen, Luke, it's not me, it's you. I got to take Jermaine Burton here. Like I said earlier, I think your take on Jermaine Burton is more likely to be the outcome than my take on Luke McCaffery. Luke McCaffrey is literally my most rostered player, but it's because of the price, right? There are some 3-round rookie drafts where I was able to get him off of waivers, late third, early fourth. I have him in 8 of my 14 leagues, but it's because of the price. I certainly would never take Luke McCaffrey if Jermaine Burton was on the board. Much as it pays me to do, I got to go with your guy here over my guy, JP.
I got to give you a kind of a difficult question here that popped up. What if they switched teams? I wonder how much of it is quarterback based here.
Luke McCaffrey in the Tyler Boyd role, he'd be a wide receiver 3 for the next 10 years. My God, I would love it. Take me back, Luke, please.
I think he's starting to forgive you now. Yeah, no, I think Joe Burrow is a big part of this with the versus Jayden Daniels, especially for the future and also just the ceiling for these guys from a receiving perspective.
And the last one for you here, JP. Start 11, full PPR, 2 tight end premium, Kyle Pitts or Hawkinson and a 26 first. I know that you had Hawkinson as a tight end sell, so I thought this one might be a little difficult for you, but...
Oh my gosh. This question actually popped into my head yesterday because when I knew when you were putting the trade segment together that you might ask me this. But man, that one is tough because I love me some Kyle Pitts. But I just think that the process just leads me to think that to tier down to Hawkinson, who could be in that tier again next year, I think I got to take the first and Hawkinson. Although, man, that is a tough one.
Yeah, I think Hawkinson and the 26 first is the right choice, but there's definitely a chance that Pitt's side, we definitely wish we'd have taken it a year from now. Only time will tell.
Man, you were hurting me with those questions. Gosh, those were tough, but that's the goal, I guess. All right, Justin, start 11. Jameson Williams in a 26 first or Jayden Reed?
So in general, my goal is to get a 25 first for Jayden Reed. 26 first, I don't really value that much less. I'm probably taking the side with the pick. However, what I would really try to do in this is see if I could get a third for Jameson Williams. I would rather have a third than Jameson Williams. I might be able to get more than that. So maybe I can see if I can get 2/3, if I can do a 2-3 swap for Jameson Williams. Or if before I make this trade, if I can figure out, will somebody else give me a second for Jameson Williams? If say like, hey, I'm going to get this guy maybe. Would you give me a second for him? I just hate Jameson Williams, but the process side, 100%, the 26 first side is what I would go with. But I understand some people believe in Jayden Reed, want to call their shot. I think we established earlier, I'm not that guy.
Yeah, I'm pretty out on Jameson Williams myself. I mean, from a talent perspective, I am very skeptical. And also, even if he is good this year, he might be the 4th target on that team, behind Jahmyr Gibbs. Honestly, if you could get that trade done, you get a first for Jayden Reed and you turn Jameson Williams into a second, I think that's an amazing move that you can make. And if you can actually get that done in a real league, I would try to make that happen.
I mean, it did happen in a real league. I just think with Jameson Williams' name there, it's less appealing for me and more of a question mark there for sure. So we hope that you had some fun with our hot takes here. Please drop your hot takes still below in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the ones we made, any ones that you had as well. Love to hear from all of you all the time. Please make sure to like and subscribe so you get our training camp updates next week, as well as our underrated players episode that's coming out in just a few days here. So thank you for joining us for another episode of the Dino Construction Podcast. We hope this was as helpful for you as it was for us and from all of us here at the Dino Construction Podcast. Until next time.